Hello everybody, welcome to the Pitlane, the official podcast of SRO Motorsports. This is David Addison, and over the next 50 minutes or so, we'll argue the merits of two star cars of the late 1990s. We'll go and focus on British GT4 in particular, and talk to Tolman Motorsport. We'll also catch up on what's been happening in eSports, with titles decided in the SRO GT eSports Championships at Kyalami. And Andy Soucek is the focus of our big interview. First, though, let's go to British GT. Chris Tolman awaits. For this week's regional focus, let's head to the British GT Championship and concentrate, first of all, on GT4, which has had a real explosion in terms of popularity in recent seasons. And one of the top teams is Tolman Motorsport. Chris Tolman joins us. Chris, first of all, how did this British GT involvement start?
The involvement started in 2014 with the driver that we had on board who was progressing and wanted to go into the British GT Championship and bought a Ginetta G55. So we did a lot of winter testing and ended up on the grid at Alton Park.
Stepping up to the big league, because you'd independently worked for other big organisations yourself, and then you came into the sport as a team running Ginettas in club racing. But going into British GT, that's a different level altogether, I guess.
It was indeed. Ironically, as you say, we were running the small Ginetta G20s, which we'd done for a couple of years. We bought a G40 as a progression, and the irony was we couldn't sell a drive in that at all. Nobody thought we had the idea or the clue how to do it, so we went straight to a GT4 G55 and put it on pole with Luke Davenport on the first ever race.
Because you've got a race team, you've got an engineering and also a historic preparation side to the business, haven't you?
That's right, yeah. I started the business in 2007 with a view to sort of do as much as I could, and it's progressed to those three categories. So we've got the engineering side, which is a fabrication and design side, the race team, which has progressed to, as you kindly said, one of the top GT4 teams in the country, and a growing historic restoration and motorsport side. This year we were supposed to be running in, I think, 4 different championships throughout Europe with the historic stuff.
Wow. But of course that suffers, like everything, because of travel restrictions and dates cancelling and so forth. Let me just go to GT4 for a second, because that really has picked up in recent seasons. It always had great potential. It was a bit of a slow burn, but over the last, 3-4 years, grids have really expanded, whether it's in Britain, whether it's been in the European Championship or classes in Asia. Is there one factor that suddenly allowed GT4 to take off in the way it has, or is it a number of different things?
I think it's a number of different things. When we first started in 2015, there was still the odd team there with a van and trailer competing. Now that has completely disappeared. And as you've seen, we've got 2 huge trucks that we take, and we've run up to 3 cars. So it's definitely more affordable than the GT3, but I think it's become increasingly more of a silver pairing, and where the pros are going to as a training ground.
Right.
15, I think in 15 we finished 3rd in Pro-Am overall and 4th overall in the championship. And there was only, I think, 2 or 3 pro pairings.
Right.
Now, if you're a Pro-Am, you're probably 17th.
How much of this success of the category, though, is down to the manufacturers getting involved and building turnkey race cars? I'm thinking back to the early days of GT4, when it was largely tuners that were responsible for taking an idea and making it into a race car. But now, you've been part of the McLaren family. You get your McLaren, and it's almost plug and play, isn't it? You don't have to do much, because there you have an outstanding GT race car straight away.
Absolutely. I mean, the manufacturer involvement through all the platforms, not just with McLaren, but with Porsche, Aston Martin, Maserati, and probably many that I've forgotten, has made it hugely appealing. Also, the number of academies that have sprung up as well. So you've got the McLaren Driver Development Program. There was the Aston Martin one as well.
Yes.
So it's proved a very popular area, and like I say, slightly more affordable than the GT3 category.
Right, let's talk about McLaren then specifically, and the driver development program, because your team became part of that in 2018. And for a relatively new, young team, that must have been a really major coup for you.
Absolutely, it was, yeah. We were only had the race team for 2 years when it got to the start of 2017. And our driver, David Addison, decided he wanted to run one of the new McLarens. He had a tie-in with his son working on the Formula One team, so and the car looked fantastic. It looked fast. Throughout 16, it had been good. So I think we were one of the first teams in the UK to take delivery of one.
Right.
And I didn't think by the end of that year that McLaren would be approaching us to look after their cars in the development program, but they did. We had a very, very good 2017, very successful. With Joe Osborne on board, we got quite a few lap records. So yeah, it was a very humbling thing to do, and yeah, an exciting program. And running 3 cars in 18 was challenging.
2019, you were second as a team in the GT4 Teams Championship within British GT. Jordan Collard, Lewis Proctor, James Dawlin, Josh Smith doing the driving duties. Everything looked great, fantastic for 2020, but global events have rather changed life. So what is the situation now for Tolman Motorsport?
Yeah, absolutely. The COVID-19 crisis has caused many problems globally, and certainly for a lot of manufacturers. And one of the main big issue with the driver development program was the shortening of the championship.
Right.
The program has taken huge pride in developing these young drivers and giving them the opportunity. Because it's not just on who's got the biggest budget to bring to the table. It gives people opportunities where they may not have got them originally.
Yes.
So to try and do that over a condensed time period, it means they're not going to get the training, they're not going to get all the PR stuff, and that they get over a 12-month period. So the decision was that to can it for this season and come back and do it in 2021.
So where does that leave the team? Because presumably you had drivers sign budgets in place that has now been affected by that decision of McLaren.
Absolutely, it's a very strange position at the moment, but effectively we've got a team with 2 cars. We've actually got 3, but 2 cars ready to go with entries in British GT4. But I think whilst I've had a few inquiries, we've not had anybody that's come up with a budget yet. But we are available. Like you said, we're one of the top teams in GT4 with some very reliable cars ready to go with a budget for someone that's available.
What are you looking for in terms of numbers of drivers now? I mean, have you got 4 spaces because of the McLaren driver development program change of mood for the year, or is it 1 seat in each car, or what's in place, what's not in place?
It's 4 seats available.
Right.
And they could be Pro-Am or Silver. It makes no difference. We could run 1 car or we could run 2.
Yes.
But it's a very strange time still. And anything could happen over the next few months, I think.
It's true. I mean, it must be incredibly hard to run a team in this situation because people are coming to you wanting answers that you can't give, and SRO running the championship can't give because everything is out of the championship's hands. It's all down to governments and situation.
Yeah, you're right. It's you can plan out various scenarios. You can think of what you might do, but at the end of the day, we're going to be told what we can and can't do. We've got most of all of the PPE restrictions in place. We've been liaising with SRO over how things will look, minimum numbers of people that the team can operate on, those kind of things. But ultimately, it will depend on what the government decide.
So you're there, you're ready to go racing. You've got 2 of the cars to have in GT4. It's one of the top teams. Just need somebody to get behind the wheel.
Absolutely, yeah. It would be. We'd love to take somebody on board and go with that. And there's huge opportunities for sponsorship, liveries, all of it really.
And of course, British GT has the television package as well as some great circuits. So fingers crossed that we have 1, if not 2, Tolman Motorsport McLarens on track this year. Chris Tolman, best of luck. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you, David.
Our subject for this week's big interview in the pit lane is a man who achieved great success driving for Bentley in GT racing, but prior to that had a great track record in single-seaters, and that is Andy Soucek. Andy, take us back in time. How did it all begin?
I started actually motorbikes. That was my passion since I was a very small kid. And one day I had a bit of a crash, and I hurt a little bit my balls. Sorry to say, but it's the it's the truth. And I remember telling my dad that, and he said, "Well, now we need to repair the bike. You okay? That's the main thing, yeah." And then a good friend of my dad told my dad, "Look, you need to forget about bikes. They're way too dangerous.
Okay.
Let him try a go-kart." And I said to my dad, "Dad, can we sell the bike and get a go-kart?" But the problem was obviously that the bike was a lot cheaper than the kart, and I come from a humble background, and my dad never gave me anything for granted. So he told me, "Look,
Okay.
you need to do your studies, you need to behave, you need to be a good kid, and if you behave, then maybe next year you'll get a go-kart." And yeah, that was a deal. I did well. I did my part of the job, and then my dad gave me a very old go-kart,
Yeah.
and it was like a Bentley for me. It felt honestly like the best thing ever, and that's how I started as a hobby, basically. And yeah, that was my first steps.
In a sense, you've headed off the next question, because talking about motorbikes, because over here we tend to think of Spain as motorbike racing mad, followed perhaps by rallying, and then car racing almost as the third choice. So I was pondering why you'd gone the car route. Well, you've now answered that. But equally, was that a problem in terms of getting sponsorship? Because a lot of companies would go bikes or rallying and then think about circuit racing.
Um, Not really. When I started, it was still possible to get some sponsorship.
Okay.
Nowadays, things have become very critical because of global warming and because of the economical or financial situation since 2007, the big crisis. I guess for younger generations, it's probably more difficult, and especially as well because the budgets are crazy high. Like when I was doing karting, you could do it for 30 grand, and now for less than 80, you can't even think about doing a proper championship with a good team and good level in order to win. So I think everything has changed and made it a little bit more complicated. But when I was racing in karting, we always had sponsors. We had
Okay.
a rice company, for example, Arroz Sos, and that company followed me for at least 5 or 6 years. So they were very loyal to me, and I think they felt somehow they felt like they wanted to help a young kid make his dream come true, because that was the reason why I was able to do well in karting and then make a name in Spain and start trying and testing single seaters. So
Yeah.
it started as a hobby. I just had fun, and it became my profession just because I did well, and I always invested all my efforts and time, and my dad helped me. I think that was a formula that made it happen.
Before we get to GT racing and Bentley in particular, we've got a big chapter of single-seater racing to cover off. There was Formula Ford, and then after that you became Spanish Formula 3 champion. How competitive a time was that?
That was great. I think it was probably some of the best years I remember in racing. Um, First of all, because a Formula 3 car is a great car to drive, very similar to a Formula 1 in terms of high-speed corner, braking efficiency, obviously not carbon brakes and not as grippy in that respect, but it's a small Formula 1. And the way you drive the car and being such a young kid, going that fast around the corners and getting to know all the different big racetracks where some of the Formula One teams were testing and so on, it was an eye opener for me. And I have great memories because since my first year, I was fighting for the podium. So I won the junior championship on my first year. And then one thing that I always said to my dad is that I think we should stay in Formula 3 until I win this championship.
Okay.
Because doing the next step, it's maybe a bit too early to go to World Series by Renault or GP2 or whatever. And I want to feel ready for it. So because I was young and we had some sponsorship and management that was helping me at the time, we could afford to do 4 years in F3. And as I said, I always was fighting, but I never won it until 2005, which was a big year because the prize for winning it was to test the Toyota Formula One car from that era, which was an amazing car. I think it was a V10 with the groove tires of, you need to remember that era with the groove tires of Michelin and Bridgestone mixed up in the paddock. Actually, the same year that Alonso became world champion. So imagine the big boom that happened in Spain with Alonso being there.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden having a young kid who was only 19 years old, that tested the Formula One car with one of the biggest teams. So I just remember flying private to Toyota. So that's why I say it's the good old days, because that's when people still had money and could afford those things. And I flew with all the press and journalists and everything, TV. So imagine only Formula 3 experience, and here you are, 19 years old, 1,000 horsepower Formula 1 car, off you go. So a bit nervous, couldn't really sleep much the night before. But and it was also the first time that I was driving a car with only 2 pedals, apart from the go-kart, because in F3 I was still on an era that we had H gearbox and then sequential, but we had the clutch, and I was always braking right foot. So imagine first time in an F1 and you go straight away and brake with the left. I was like, this is not going to work. But immediately I got used to it, and it was like, I think in 8 or 10 laps I was amongst like maybe 1.5 seconds off the pace, and then I ended up being, I think, quite fast. No references because it was a private test. And I have a funny story about that. So the first outing of the F1, all the press was there, and I was obviously nervous because they told me the clutch is on the steering wheel and you need to release it smoothly, and the car has to do his own clutch map, and I didn't even know what they were talking about. So I was just there, and I released the clutch very slowly, and the car would stall. And I don't know why, but they didn't have the anti-stall on. So it was a bit ridiculous in front of everyone to stall the car like 5 times. And at some point, I just said, stop everything. And I told the engineer to come to the car. And I said, there is a problem with this clutch. He told me, no, you're not used to it. You need to release it smoothly. I said, no, I'm telling you, there is a problem with this clutch. And until you don't look at the problem, I'm not going to even try. And the guy was like, shit, this kid, 19 years old, telling me what to do. And effectively, the guys forgot to do the configuration of the clutch on the computer. So basically, we had no trouble.
Okay.
So the bite was straight away, and it was going from 0 to 100.
Right.
And when they did it, I went out, and straight away, I was able to get out of the garage. And then I could see all the press and journalists like giving me a round of applause. Then I thought, shit, this is not a good start.
Excellent. Formula Renault 3.5 within World Series by Renault followed, then GP2, but 2008 season started badly. You were meant to be going to the FMS team, and that fell apart within about 5 days of the championship starting, didn't it?
Yeah, that was another case. I didn't remember that. I was going to go through World Series first because it was a great year. I nearly won the championship.
Well, tell us about that.
No, I was about to win World Series into the last race in Barcelona. I was leading the championship against Parente, Danielson, Robbie Kerr, James Rossiter, what's his name? Vettel. Yeah. I mean, some
what's his name?
Really good. Stephen Kane. I don't know, like a lot of really good, talented Valsecchi. If I think about it, I could give you 15 names that have made it to professional racing. And I was very unlucky in the start of the last race. I had to finish P5 to win the title. And Robbie Kerr Rossiter touched at the end of the straight line. I had to go wide to avoid it, into the gravel, P last. The other guy that was fighting with me won the race, and I lost the championship there. Anyway, we were all very tight in points, so there was a few people that could win it. And finally, I ended up P4. Very close to the leaders, but it was a great year. And then in GP2, after 1 year with David Price Racing, that wasn't the best year of my life, to be honest. We had a lot of problems, and the team was about to be sold to Trevor Collin. And finally, like a few weeks before the first race, the sell never happened. So big mess, difficult year. But David is a super good friend of mine, and we made a big friendship since then. And the next year, which was meant to be the year, I had a good offer from Fisichella Motorsport, which was run by Paolo Coloni, Italian mafia. and I just remember going to the office. That's something I've never made public, but I don't care anymore. It's a long time ago, and I don't think he will remember much of it. But he called me like urgently after we signed the contract and everything. You need to come to the office. It's very important. I need to talk to you. So I went there, and I remember him closing, like on a movie, the screens of the office. You know, like the what you put on the windows screen.
The blinds.
Yeah, the blinds. And I said, what the hell? So the guy told me, you know what? I don't have a guarantee of your sponsor and manager, and I need a guarantee that you guys are going to pay. I'm like, hey, we've signed the contract, we've established the payment terms, and you agreed with that. Yeah, but we need to make a new contract. I said, you know what? I don't want to say the word, but I said, I'm gonna go to Spain. You have a problem yourself. The contract is signed. If you want to do something, talk to my lawyer. It's not a good way to start the season and blah blah. So anyway, I spoke to the lawyer because I knew what was happening, what was coming. And 1 week before the first race in Barcelona, with everything confirmed and me not being particularly happy with them, after all the testing in preseason and everything, they signed another driver instead of me without prior notification, nothing. So what I did is I went straight to the judge, to the court. But myself, I went to the place near the track to tell them that I wanted to seize the cars from the team. So I was fuming.
Okay, yeah.
I was completely out of my mind. And the police, I won the case. It was a short case because I had to do it within 24 hours. So I brought all the documents, emails, contract, blah blah, and that's phrasing, isn't it? And the judge decided that I was right. So the police went to the track, and I was there. So I was witnessing everything, and said to Coloni, "Look, this is a paper. You need to seize the cars because of this." And Coloni in front of me took the paper, broke it, threw it to the bin, and I thought, no, this is not happening. But obviously, he was part of the the GP2 championship, so I didn't want to bother Bruno Michel and all the people involved. So I let it go in Barcelona. But then we kept fighting, and finally, by winning all the court cases that we had with them, they seized the cars in Spa. But the guy was so clever that he had already transferred all the goods from one company to another. So we were going against a company that had nothing. We then had to negotiate with him, and we ended up having an agreement. But yeah, it was a lost first few races for me, and not very comfortable in terms of the press. Sure. And I ended up doing the championship with Supernova for the rest of the season with Parente as a teammate, and I had a lot of fun. We had some good results.
Yes. And
for me, that was enough in GP2. I thought I've had enough here.
Yeah. There was also Super League, which was that football-based championship, which you did very well in, and you won a lot. But did that feel like a career move, or was it just something to do to keep racing, to keep your name known?
Yeah, more than anything, it was fun. The cars were mega. They were 750 horsepower V12, very good power, also good aero in the fast corners, and the drivers involved were all very, very good, And I remember having Dornbos, Bormann, Vervish, so a lot of current GT3 drivers that are racing in GT World Challenge against me. So it was a good championship with good drivers and some good cars, and it was for free. We got paid a little bit, and it was a fun way to be entertained at the time. So I did that, I think, for two or 3 years, but I did races. I never did the whole campaign. They called me for a race 2 weeks before the race, and I did one race for the Corinthians club in Brazil, and I met the president of the soccer club who invited me to Brazil. It was completely crazy. And then with Atletico Madrid, with the Spanish team, and then with the Galatasaray, with the Turkish team. So basically, I had to change a soccer team every 5 races and be very loyal to the team and say that it was my favorite team. And
you have all the shirts lined up at home. You've got all the different team kit. Yeah.
But like I say, it's like a soccer player. If David Beckham goes to Real Madrid, he will kiss the Real Madrid logo, and he goes to Manchester United, he will do the same. And maybe it's 1 year difference, but it's whoever gives you the job, isn't it? And
for sure.
And after that, that was, I think, maybe the craziest move of my career, to go from GP2 to a newborn Formula 2. that was launched by Jonathan Palmer with Williams. And the idea of Jonathan was pretty cool because he said, look, all cars will be the same, and they will all be run by my company, and we will change engineers every race, and the cars will be it will be a draw at the beginning of the year, and you will be assigned a certain number of the car, and if you're not happy, then we have a test driver that can prove if the car is good or not, and we can change it. So it was all very clean, and there was no money involved. Whoever has more money can test more or can get a better team or whatever. It was the same for everyone. And then the price for that, if you won it, was to test for Williams.
Yeah.
And then I said to my dad, look, you know what? I think this is the right place to go. I still believe I'm better than some of the drivers and I can win. Because I lost a lot of confidence in GP2, by not winning, and all of a sudden from F3 winning, World Series winning, going to GP2 and get my ass kicked in every race was tough psychologically to accept. So yeah, I went to F2 against Robert Wickens, against Philip Eng, Bortolotti, Aleshin.
They were good entries, weren't they? I mean, there were some very good drivers of that time. Yeah,
I think that year was probably, if not the strongest, one of the strongest years of that championship. And I think everybody wanted to be there on year one because it was the year that Jonathan was going to push for the winner to be in F1. No, if he wanted the championship to survive, it was the right move.
Right.
It was a good year. I won the championship 2 races before the end in Imola, and I was just focused on that 100% because I knew the target was to use that to go to Formula One. It was like my last shot.
How did that Williams test go when you won the championship? Did you feel better equipped to do the Williams test than you had the Toyota test?
It's not that I felt more prepared. I just I think I had the opportunity because I spoke to Patrick Head to actually try and do the best time of the day against other drivers, which with the Toyota test I was alone, so I could not really prove how good I was because there was no comparison possible. And I remember arriving there, looking at the entry list and seeing Jules Bianchi with the Ferrari, Gary Pafford with the McLaren, Di Resta with the Force India, Conway with the Brown GP that was the winner of the championship that year with Jenson Button. I don't know, Darlene Ricciardo with the Red Bull, Brendan Hartley with the Toro Rosso, like big names.
Yeah, no dummies, yeah.
And I got there and I said to Patrick, are you going to give me the super soft tires and low fuel? Because I really need to do well here. He said, yeah, no problem. You will get everything to do a good job, but it will be in your hands. At the end of the day, we can't drive the car for you. And since the beginning of the test, I was right up there, top 3, top 4. And by the end of the test, I thought, oh, this is my moment now, super softs and so on. And when I go out on the track and I see everybody else, everyone was on super softs, I thought, I'm not going to be the only one trying to put a good lap time here because it was a rookie test and everybody wanted to show how good they were.
Yeah, sure.
So I was lucky that year the Williams was a very good car with a Toyota engine. That was qualifying P5 with, somewhere around P5 with Rosberg and Nakajima. And I remember my first run with new tires, I spun in turn 3. And in Formula One, when you spin, it's not like in a GT where you just rejoin and that's it, no problem. They put the car on top of the truck and they cover it with a blanket, and then you need to wait for the car to be brought back to the. And I was like, no way! And there's only 45 minutes left of the session, so I was dropping on the timesheets, obviously, because everybody was going out on super softs.
Yes.
And then Patrick came to me and he said, one more shot, and that's it. And I was like, okay, the pressure is on. So I went out with 10 minutes remaining, and I think I did the lap of my life, to be honest. And I was P1. I went P1 3/10 quicker than P2. And obviously, I was all over the press. It was the first rookie day test with everybody there and all the big stars. and someone called Andy Soucek, who, people knew, but not so much as maybe Bianchi, for example, was a Ferrari driver already, and so on. It was the fastest. So that opened the doors to F1 again. And I was able to sign for Virgin Racing, because my idea was to be the third driver of Williams. And I had a little bit the word of Patrick Head and Frank Williams saying that they would be very happy to have me as a third. But Toto Wolff came with Valtteri Bottas, and Toto bought some shares. I don't know if you remember, but at that time, Toto had some shares of Williams. Yes. And the only condition he put was to have his driver that he managed as a third driver, test and reserve, which I fully understood. And actually, I get on with Toto really well. And when we see each other, he always reminds me of certain moments where he could have been my manager and I refused. Nowadays, maybe we could be talking about something else, but you never know. At that time, it was what it was, and I signed for Virgin Racing. And everything that Richard Branson touches, you have the feeling that he makes something great out of it. But F1 is not as simple, it's maybe more complicated than flying to the space, like he's planning to do with Virgin. So the whole story was that they tried to do a car based on CFD, on a computer program. With no wind tunnel, and that was a differential factor to every other team that existed on the grid. And my feeling was like, well, I don't think that Ferrari or McLaren or Williams are so stupid to use the wind tunnel just to spend money on it. There must be a reason for the data, no? But they tried. They failed, and it was a tough year for me because I could never drive a car. I did a lot of sim testing there with a simulator, and I got really bored. And in the middle of the year, I just pulled out of the deal because I said, "Look, it's not fun to be here just for the sake of being here." And it looks great. I get 100 interviews every day, but I don't know what to talk about anymore because we're dead last, 3 seconds off or 4 seconds off, and I'm not driving the car. So he understood, and we had a let's say a friendly divorce, and I decided to try something else, and that's when I met the incredible world of GT racing, testing a McLaren of Boots and Gignon in Zolder on a rainy day, so it wasn't maybe the best moment or best track to do a test in terms of safety and so on, but it was mind-blowing. I loved every second of it, and I thought this is where I want to be. And that's 8 years ago now. So,
it was the end of 2012, wasn't it?
Correct.
And then there was another season of McLaren's in 2013, but two different teams, ART Grand Prix in the endurance, and then FIA GT, the shorter sprint races for the MRS team.
Correct.
And then the following season, you split your time between some Aston Martins as well as McLaren, because you drove for Beechstein at Baku, got a couple of seconds with Johnny Adam in the sprint races in Baku. All of which was before Bentley. So, I mean, obviously Bentley has been a very happy home, but was there a chance to do something more for McLaren or more for Aston Martin? Where did the Bentley approach fit into all this?
It was also one of those funny stories because when I did McLaren, it was ART. I think ART is probably one of the best teams that exist in racing, apart from F1. And now the owner is obviously the team principal of Alfa Romeo in F1, Frédéric Vasseur. And Fred was very fair, to be honest, because what happened there, and once again, nobody knows, but maybe this podcast is the right platform to tell people
more secrets,
about
Andy. More secrets.
More secrets, exactly. Hopefully they don't bounce back to me. But no, this one is actually very nice, and I can really not speak bad about anybody apart from Coloni in GP2 with the GP2. So with Frederick, he told me, look, Andy, the first year of GTs, you'll have to bring some budget, even if I know how good you are, because funny enough, I forgot about that, but I tested for them in GP2 and I was the fastest in Jerez with Luca Di Grassi as my teammate. But anyway, it was a great test for me. They had a super good image, and they made me an offer to race for them. And that was the year of my life, because Hamilton won the championship, ART offered me a drive, and Toto Wolff wanted to be my manager.
Wow.
And we refused Toto Wolff because of the percentage he wanted. We didn't have the money to pay the ART deal, and everything went completely bad and wrong to a different direction. But anyway, that was nice from him, because he told me, look, maybe at that time in 2007, I think it was, we couldn't make it happen. But this time I want to help you because I know how good you are and I really believe in you.
Okay.
And I was able to get a sponsor. At least that's what I thought. But the sponsor never paid. So at some point, my manager had to pay. And when we were coming to the last race of the season, after leading the championship with Leclerc and Parisi, we were in the top 3, I don't remember, but we did quite well in several races, a few podiums and so on. My manager decided he didn't want to pay the last few races, and the sponsor never paid. So I was left there with nothing. And Vasseur told me, Andy, I want to help you, but I can't just run you for free, because the cost is the cost. The contract that we have is a contract.
Yeah.
And you've been doing a great job. If you finish a season on a high and you still do the job that you're doing, I promise you, I'll get you a factory drive for next year with McLaren. And you know what I did? I took all the money that I had left in my account, which was not much, I can tell you. And I made a transfer myself to Frederick, to ART.
Okay.
And nobody knows, but I paid it. Well, he knows because it came from my account. But that was probably the biggest fear I had in my life, to say, what the hell did I do? I mean, how many crazy things would you do just to keep on racing? You know, maybe at some point you need to think that it's over. I don't know. But at that time, I still thought I could do it. And it went well, because we ended up P2, I think, or P3 in Silverstone. We did a great race. And Frederick told me, Andy, I will do whatever is needed to get you a factory drive. So next year, I went to see Martin Whitmarsh. Everything was in place. And 20 days later, the news is out. Ron Dennis is back.
Okay.
And that meant Martin obviously had nothing else to decide, because he was being replaced by Ron after a few years where Martin obviously took over the whole business. And Ron decided to stop all the ongoing contracts that other people were dealing with. So Frederick said, Andy, I will respect your deal. And even if I don't get the McLaren deal in place, I will pay you myself. The team will cover your salary.
Okay.
And he did.
Wow.
And he did. And I raced alongside Kevin Estre and Kevin Corges.
Yeah.
And at the end of that year, I got the opportunity to do this race with Aston, with Johnny Adam in Baku. And we finished P2. And Aston made me an offer to be a factory driver. But at the same time, I had an offer from Bentley. Okay. And then we did a test in Portimao, and it went really well. And then they made me an offer.
Right.
And I had to decide between Aston and Bentley, but I saw the opportunity and the conditions were better with Bentley. And that's why I took the deal. And it's been a great time, obviously, to spend 5 years as a factory driver for Bentley.
It looked as though it's been a very happy home for you, and a good relationship, not only in terms of what you've achieved on the track, but I'm thinking back to having been at a couple of the end of season Bentley Awards, and it's clearly a place that you're happy and you fit in really well.
Yeah, I think it is a family at the end, because when you spend 5 years with the same people, obviously we went for dinner every year 2 or 3 times to Malcolm and Elaine's house in Cumbria. We were working with the same trainer. We did 3 training camps every year. So we spend a lot of time together, and that relationship has obviously, it's something special, and you can't deny it. But as well as things look very good from the outside, there's always things that when you do a mistake or the team does a mistake, there's always little things that also happen, and the relationship is not always as smooth as you may think. But that happens in every team, in every circumstance. It's absolutely normal. So we decided to make it friendly and go different ways, different paths, because I think we both needed at least 1 year of refreshing our heads in a way. And actually, I'm still driving, as you know, with K-Pax, a Bentley, and I'm still driving the Bentley in sim racing, representing K-Pax and the brand. So for sure, the relationship is more than good. I spoke to Paul Williams, to the head of Motorsport, yesterday. I speak to him every week, 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
So the relationship is great. It's just that I wanted to try a different path, but then COVID hit us quite badly when I had another program already in place with a different manufacturer and another team. And that's probably not going to happen this year anymore, but probably for 2021 it will. So yeah, I'm pretty happy that I can spend some time with the family now and have a little daughter that is only 2 years old, so I can see her growing now. But I can't wait to go back racing with K-Pax in Imola in just 1 month.
Sure. I mean, the Bentley relationship, as you say, it's taken you from European racing to America, as well as some of the IGTC races. And GT racing in America is growing. It's getting stronger and stronger. Not perhaps as strong as we see in Europe, but it must be good to be there and seeing that category grow and the strength of the entry getting better all the time.
I loved the US. I did 2 years with K-Pax there, and I can tell you that it was a joy. Just the fact that you're a sportsman and you drive race cars and you drive for Bentley, that for them means a lot.
Yeah.
So the culture that they have is a lot of passion. So starting from there is a very welcoming paddock. If you go to that paddock, you will feel something really cool. All the teams are very open to host all the guests. In Europe, we're a bit more closed doors. The teams have a structure in the garage with all the panels and only guests are welcome. And although we try to make it, an SRO always tries to have that approach where drivers and teams make it very accessible for the fans. In America, it's just like crazy. People can walk in the garage whilst the mechanic are rushing, building up the cars, and nobody will look bad at them. It's like a different sort of culture. And the entries were really competitive. You have at least 5 cars that are, if you put them to race in Europe, they would definitely be in the top 5, top 10 as well. And the level of the drivers and the tracks is amazing. Like going to Motorsport, going to VAR, going to Road America,
Watkins Glen,
some Watkins Glen, some of those tracks are insane. Like they don't exist in Europe. We won 5 or 6 races, did 7 pole positions, finished on the podium in every single race apart from 2. So 14 races, we finished 12 times on the podium and we still didn't win the championship. So great time. I will truly miss the US, and I really hope to be back one day, because it was super good fun to be racing over there.
I hate to talk about this in a sense, but we ought to just touch on it briefly. Bathurst last year, was that one that got away? Because that looked for much of the race as though it was going to be a Bentley win.
Yeah, it should have been, to be honest. And there is only one person to blame, and that's me. And I've always said it on interviews that the team did an amazing job, teammates as well. Myself, if you just take that silly mistake out of the equation, I was the amongst the fastest. I think I was the 3rd fastest of the race, just half a tenth of Jules Bounon, who was flying on that weekend.
Yes.
So I never really found an excuse to it, and I don't want to find one. But having said that, it should have been a win. And in a way, the fact that they won 2020, so this year, with such a dominating win, I think, it was deserved. Everybody in the team and the drivers called me to say that I was part of that win, and that made me feel really proud as well. So sometimes in life, you do a mistake that will follow your whole life, because you always keep thinking about what you could have done differently. But I'm someone that doesn't like to look back at what I could have or should have done. Thing is, I did it, but as well as I did that mistake, I did many other things very well.
Of course,
that gave us wins and podiums that without me, they wouldn't have been possible. So, one day it's me, one day it's a team, but we are a team. We win and we lose together.
2 final things. The first being, you touched earlier on this possible program for 2020, now 2021. Can you give us any clues?
No, no, because
Okay, that's easily done.
I want to have everything in place, because this year we were about to announce it just before COVID, and COVID made everything just go
Sure.
wrong. So I rather have everything in place before I announce it. But it's a different manufacturer, and that's all I can say at the moment.
Okay. But then, what does Andy Soucek do when he stops racing? You may not have thought this far, but is there going to be a driver management business? Is there going to be your own team? Would you walk away from the sport? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I have. Since 10 years, I have my own company.
Yeah.
It's not me only. I've got business partners, and without them, it would have never been possible. But we have a driving school, which became an agency that organizes a lot of different events for brands that want to launch new cars. They would contract us in order for us to take care of the presentation of the vehicles. But obviously, for the 5 years that I've been a factory at Bentley, I was very careful with that, because if Mercedes comes and hires us, it doesn't look good if a Bentley driver goes to a Mercedes event. So therefore, I decided to step a little bit aside. But now that I'm not a factory anymore, I can obviously do it. On top of that, I do quite a lot of media stuff with radio and TV for Formula One. I also have a column that I write every now and then in a very big online newspaper here in Spain. Now I'm working on something really cool in sim racing that I will announce shortly, because I got really involved with this during the quarantine, and it's blown me away. It's like crazy how much it's growing. And I've got other plans in mind, and to be honest, now I've got a list of way too many things that I plan to do. So it doesn't mean I'm going to retire at all.
Sure.
It just means that I'm somehow someone that looks for other things as well, in order to keep busy, make money aside from racing. But they're all very linked to motorsport, to be honest, because I think that's my expertise. That's what I know best, and that's what I've been doing all my life. So I think using that knowledge to somehow be an asset to companies is always very, very good, and you can make a living out of it. So we'll see. But I can tell you there is a lot of things that Andy Soucek would like to do in the future apart from racing, for sure.
Fantastic. And racing, we hope, will be getting underway soon, just to add to that to-do list. Andy, as expected, it's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us in the pit lane.
I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks for having me as well.
One of the most important advances in the GT world has been timing, or timing and scoring if you prefer. Gone are the days of a manual lap chart. Now the system is so advanced that a team of computer boffins acts as the timekeeping force, and it's as vital for race control as it is for teams and fans. The timing screen itself is a mine of information. If we take GT World Challenge Europe, Swiss Timing produces a screen full of information that has to be readable as well as instant. So, when commentators talk of gaps of thousandths of a second, that's because as soon as a car crosses the line, the information flashes up on the timing screen in the booth. That screen offers the car number and the driver behind the wheel at the time, with a setting in the car relating to which driver. SRO's official entry list confirms who is driver 1, 2 or 3, and the transponder switch must be in the correct setting for that driver. Then the screen tells you the lap time just set, the best lap time set by that car, and what it does in the 3 sectors of the lap. If a car is on a personal best lap, the sector goes green, and if it's an absolute best, so the fastest sector of anyone, it goes purple. If you hear us talking about someone lighting up the timing screen, it's because they are setting green or purple sectors, and you know it's going to be a quick lap. The lap time follows a similar pattern. Green if it's the car's best, purple if it is the fastest lap of the session. The screen also tells us which class the car is in, and for qualifying in the World Challenge Europe endurance events, there are pages showing the order in that section of qualifying and another set with the aggregated order. The Lumirank display is also linked to the timing system, and that's how you get to know which driver is in the car with the short code of their name and the position the car is in, be it in that qualifying session, practice session, or the race itself. The timing screen also has a message line, which is the way that the race director can confirm any penalties or investigations, or offer information about a safety car period or the race start countdown. All this data comes from the transponder a car carries, and it's also vital in a race to check that the car is conforming to the regulation pit stop time, and it can measure whether a driver has exceeded the regulation allowance behind the wheel, with the time measured at the pit in and pit out loops. At the end of a session, you can have a full rainforest of paperwork as the results are produced by overall placing, class positions, sector and lap analysis, and for the race, a full lap chart and pit stop log. The timekeepers themselves have a bank of laptops, spare laptops, servers, and even a camera focused on the timing line to check for any dead heats or to clarify any glitches. They sit overlooking the timing line, which for them is the most important part of the circuit. And why, people ask, do I call it the timing line? Well, another name is the control line, but the truth is that many circuits have a start and finish line in different places, like Monza and Silverstone as two examples. The finish line has to be in front of the timekeepers. But if that's a long way back from turn one, the sport's governing body moves the start line forward so that the field doesn't arrive at overly high speeds in a bunch on cold tyres on lap one. So a start and finish line is a rare beast, and the timing line is the exact place that all the data is collated. Make sense? We've certainly come a long way from a clipboard, a stopwatch, and a pen. Real world racing is starting to get underway, but we've already got champions crowned in the SRO world because the SRO GT eSports Championship was decided at Kyalami, and the pro category won by Louis Deletraz at the end of an extraordinary season, Louis, in which you were the only driver to score points in every race, and that, I guess, is a very good way to win a championship.
Thank you very much. Definitely, I really enjoyed that. Obviously, with the situation in the world, eSport became really big. And I took my chance. I will race for GPX Racing in real life. They asked me if I wanted to do a championship. We did, and we won. So couldn't be better.
I was going to ask, and you've preempted it, how the esports entry came about, because I suppose I should really have introduced you as FIA Formula 2 racer and Haas Formula 1 tester, Louis Deletraz. But here you are, an esports champion, and now the link with GPX and the Porsche.
Yeah, so basically, I've always been to single seaters, and I've never been as close as that to Formula One with my reserve role, and that's still the objective. But I was part of the BMW Junior program a few years back. I already did some GT racing, and GPX Stream basically has been sponsoring me in single seaters since I started. Now they have their own team in GT. I did some testing this year in the GT World Challenge in Paul Ricard. And we were supposed to do one race where I was going to replace a Porsche driver because he wasn't available, the Paul Ricard race.
Right.
Before the situation with the coronavirus started. Mm-hmm. So that's what initially got us started with my GT World Challenge commitment. And here we are with the esports situation because it started, and it's honestly, it was an amazing championship to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's a GT connection anyway, because your father, after his single seater and Formula One time, raced in FIA
exactly.
GT. You've also won the virtual Le Mans 24 hours, so huge success in esports racing. It's probably not the success you were anticipating back in March, really, was it?
Definitely not. I was not expecting. All this esport. I've always been, into the sim racing generation, and I always had one home, but I never did as much as that. Then a bit for practice, but mostly I was using the Haas F1 sim or Renault F1 sim, which is like completely different. It's huge machines that moves around, and we use for F1 development. But yeah, this winter I upgraded my sim. Actually, obviously I didn't know about coronavirus, and I had something quite a good setup at home. And then obviously all this esports got on, and I just went more and more into it. Started with the F1 esports, then the GT World Challenge, the SRO esports, and Le Mans. So I ended up doing so much, and yeah, I've been pretty successful, and I really enjoyed that period, to be honest.
You were saying a moment ago about what a good championship the SRO GT Esports Championship had been. When you first got involved in that, was it with an aim to win it, or was it just something to do? Because you seem to have taken it very seriously.
Yes, well, GPX told me, "Do you want to take part?" And I was like, "Okay, what game is it? What platform? And the dates, etc." It all seemed good, so I said yes straight away. Without any, obviously, I always want to win when I enter a competition, but I didn't know the level of people. I didn't know as well how the game works, so it's always difficult. But yes, from the first race, practiced a lot. We had I found some sim racers that gave me some good setups and also helped me out a lot. We were straight away competitive. And also I was with Rafael Marcello. We did it together. He was doing it for Mercedes and me for GPX and Porsche. And we just had fun together, just practiced a lot together, and we ended up being super fast both. So it was also a challenge, but good fun. And the organization of it was very serious. The racing and how the penalties were applied. Everything was really done as real life, and it was enjoyable to race. It was not a crash festival, let's say.
Sure. We spoke to Ben Barnicoat a few weeks ago after he'd won at the Nürburgring, that great battle that he had with you, and he was reminding us it was a bit like Formula Renault NEC, where you raced against each other at the Nürburgring, and he beat you there, and ultimately he won a championship. But in this context, you've, if you like, avenged that defeat by beating Ben, haven't you?
I did. That was the goal. I mean, also with Rafael and Marcello and Ben, we know each other for so long. And it was really good fun to actually race again each other, because now he's in GT, I'm still in single seater, so we didn't have the opportunity. And I was pretty angry, to be honest, after Nürburgring, because I led the whole race and I just made one silly mistake. He won the race, and I was, I'm so stupid. And I really wanted to get my revenge. So in the end, I got the championship, so I'm quite happy.
Talk us through that last race, because obviously you were, and you said this to me after the race, you were thinking about points, but you had to get through the first corner where there was contact and it could all have gone horribly wrong.
Yes, so the first thing, I knew I was leading, but in quali, I was like, whatever, we have 25 kilo BOP. I really have to start in front to avoid the troubles, because mid-pack is real life a mess, but sim racing is also a mess. I mean, we saw Marcucci got taken out from P5.
Yeah.
So I was super happy with my lap, and I got pole because I really didn't expect it. I don't think I was the fastest. I just think I got the lap together. And for the race, I wanted to survive, but I also wanted to stay as forward as possible. When I saw Marcucci got taken out, I had a bigger margin caution, let's say. But lap 2, I had contact with the McLaren, and obviously that's things that happen in sim racing. I think, I don't know exactly, but it seemed to be a bit of a connection, because on my screen I didn't feel like I was so close, and it happened. It was contact. It was a shame for him, but luckily it wasn't for a championship player driver. Just
talk to me about the ballast. You say the 25 kilos. Does it make a massive difference in sim racing?
It does, at least in Assetto Corsa competition, because like I had, the Porsche is a very good car on braking and traction phase out of slow corner. High speed is extremely oversteer and difficult. So like Barcelona was quite good, apart from turn 9, but Silverstone for me was definitely the hardest round. And basically when we got to the vote of the last round 5, it was a public vote.
Yes.
There was 4 tracks, which was Laguna, Bathurst, Kyalami, and one more, I can't remember. But anyway, they were all not fitting me apart from Kyalami. So I really took it serious. I said to all my followers on Instagram, on Twitter, please vote for Kyalami. I need you, because otherwise I know I cannot win, especially more with the 25 kg. And I mean, like tracks like Barcelona and Kyalami are Porsche dominated tracks. But with the 18 and the 25 kilos of BOP, I was just in the pack. So I really had to do good laps and be strong.
So you're already a champion. You're already a Le Mans 24-hour winner. What does the real world of racing hold for you now once the world unlocks in the next few weeks?
To be fair, I was super happy also with Le Mans, because it was huge, the event. And we won it. And you can never start Le Mans thinking you will win it, because you never know after 24 hours. So it was like a real happiness feeling after, it same as yesterday after the race. But now also, I can't wait for the real world. I've been missing the real feeling of racing, of a car, of pushing it to the limit. And I mean, sim racing is great. It's amazing thing. I think there is space for both, but real life is also something I miss a lot. And I hope to have the same success.
Oh, well, indeed. And is that going to be in Formula 2 and or GT racing?
So I will do F2, which is starting in 2 weeks now, very soon in Austria. The calendar is not so clear yet, because we F1 hasn't and FI hasn't announced all the dates yet.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But we know the first 8 rounds. I have a Le Mans planned with Rebellion, and that's also the same as the GPX eSport. I raced with Rebellion in real life, and we did Le Mans virtual together. So that's was a good prep. And I will also do the GT in Paul Ricard if it doesn't clash with my F2 commitments. And maybe more, who knows?
Fantastic. Well, Louis, congratulations on being the very first SRO eSports GT champion, and good luck for real world racing when the season gets underway.
Thank you very much. And also it was a pleasure to to be racing the SRO eSports with you guys. Thank you.
Let's turn our attentions then to two more star cars, and let's go back to the late 1990s and the early noughties and the FIA GT Championship. I'm joined by Tom Hornsby, who has come up with one nugget from entry lists of the time. My offering is the Lister Storm. Tom, what are you going for?
Well, Adders, I'm going for the Chrysler Viper GTS-R, the car of the first FIA GT era, 99 to 2004.
Because?
Well, because it was the defining car of that era. Already a successful car when it turned up in 99. Of course, it bridged the gap between the original FIA GTs with GT1 and when we went to GT2 as being the main class. It won 97's championship, it won 98's championship, and then it won the very first FIA GT championship for GT2 cars in 99. It followed that up in 2001 and 2002 and won a string of other major races and titles as well. When you talk about FIA GT from that era, you have to begin and end with the Chrysler Viper GTS-R.
But what it didn't have was character. The Lister Storm had character. It had that British bulldog spirit, you know, a 7-litre V12 Jaguar engine, top speed of 208 miles an hour. Okay, it went through a couple of incarnations with the GTL going to the GTS, and then we got the GT with reworked fronts and backs. But once Lawrence Pierce and his team had cracked it, second in the championship in 1999, British GT champions that year as well. 2000, it was the Lister, this underdog team against the might of Orica and those Vipers. 5 race wins, the FIA GT title for Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter, and a British GT title on the back of it. 4 wins in FIA GT the year after. Another 3 the year after that, another win in 03, and another British GT title. They didn't make many Listers. There wasn't this great resource in the same way that the Vipers had. You didn't have so many teams running them and bringing back the data. It was the great underdog effort that took on your Chrysler Viper. It took on all the others and came out on top.
You've gone with a similar situation to the panels from a couple of weeks ago, though, haven't you? Here, it's
you notice a trend.
Yes, yeah. You know, the heart says the Lister Storm. It's that plucky British underdog. Everything done on a shoestring. But we do also need to consider some cold hard facts on the side of the Viper. And the reality is that the Chrysler is a superior car. You've just quoted all those facts. I've got some for you here, as well as all those FIA GT championships. 3 of them to your 1 with the Storm. But there's also 3 Le Mans class wins, 3 Nürburgring 24-hour wins, 2 Spa 24-hour wins, 2 ALMS titles, national titles in France, Belgium, Italy, Sweden, and Germany. And it won the Daytona 24 Hours outright in 2000 against the prototypes. One more thing for you. You've said yours had the V12 engine. It did. Mine had the 8-litre V10, so not too bad in comparison to the V12.
Okay, so what are we going to base this on then? If it's sheer numbers, yes, the Viper gets it. You could argue strength in numbers, it was always going to do better because there were so many more of them made. But when you see a Viper and a Lister in the paddock, which one do you gravitate towards? I reckon you go to the Lister.
Yeah, I think if you were to base it on that, and often motorsport and racing cars, it's about heart ruling head, I think you probably would gravitate towards the Lister Storm. And of course, it had the iconic Newcastle United livery as well. This week, I think I'll give you the Lister Storm.
Okay, because I was just thinking on sheer numbers, maybe the Viper was going to edge it. But we'll take the Lister because it was a great British car, a great British underdog, taking on the might of the Chrysler Vipers in the FIA GT Championship and in domestic British GT Championships as well, and coming out on top. That's all for this edition of The Pit Lane. Next time, we'll speak to Jesus Sicilia about his silver eSports success. We'll have more from the regions as the season start gets closer. And there'll be another big interview, a Tech Talk plus another Star Car debate as well. The Pit Lane is the official podcast of SRO Motorsport. Production is by Ade Holbrook, and this is David Addison. Thanks for your company. We'll see you next time.